I'd like to welcome you back to the House, Minister, and to welcome the opportunity to have a debate on living with COVID, and conscious that we've already had a debate earlier on the vaccinations. Although inevitably there's overlap, I don't think anyone who's spoken so far in this debate has done so without mentioning vaccinations, and I'll be the same. I think that they're so bound up. And of course all of us are having this debate in eager anticipation of tomorrow's government announcement as to where we are going with the plan for future months. And after 3 months of such a tough lockdown, I think it's absolutely understandable that all of us are very much hoping to see some easing of restrictions, albeit always mindful of the public health requirements. And certainly if I were to give a wish list, it would be first and foremost that schools do all return on the 12th of April. And I speak not just as a parent of 2 teenagers, but just generally. I think all of us are very conscious of the lost generation, the huge loss to children represented by prolonged school closures, and very conscious that there's a whole cohort of secondary school children who have had no in-person schooling since before Christmas. So that's an immense thing, and if we do that alone, that's going to be, I think, hugely beneficial for our young people and children. The 5-kilometre restriction, there's been widely signalled that that's due to be lifted, and again, I very much welcome that. I think we're seeing a huge amount of congestion, particularly anyone who lives in city centre Dublin, or indeed in any other city centre, I think would be conscious of that really does need to lift. People have been living under that for so long, and any of us with relatives or friends in other European countries will be conscious that geographic restrictions are quite unusual. Even in Belgium, where they've had really high rates of community transmission, they don't have geographic restrictions, and that really, I think, does need to go to be lifted. And of course then sporting activities for children outdoors, I think, again, there's been some signalling that may change, and that would be welcome too. I would say, however, that what we're seeing now when we talk about living with COVID is really the result of a failure to move more assertively and more intensively at an earlier stage. And certainly my party, and in particular Deputy Alan Kelly, but Labour generally, had put forward in January a national aggressive suppression strategy, and the need for that, in line with the sort of zero COVID principles being enunciated by the independent scientific advocacy group here. And I do just want to really pay tribute to them, because I think they have been proven right. And of course, had we put in place, for example, the stricter measures around mandatory hotel quarantine, then I think we would have seen a much greater impact then as a result of restrictions, and indeed it may well have been that restrictions wouldn't have needed to be in place so long. I do welcome the fact that we now have at least a limited scheme of hotel quarantine, but I think the difficulty is that it's in some ways like closing a stable door after the horse has bolted, and it's also very much piecemeal, and there's a certain sense of equity also, as we've seen in recent days, where people feel just because they came in from a particular country that doesn't necessarily have a higher rate than others, that they're still subject to this rule. So I do think we need to revisit that list of 33 countries to make sure that it's not inequitable to people. And I would just say also, for those who were disparaging about zero COVID, I just wanted to quote Jacinda Ardern. I was looking again at the New Zealand Prime Minister and what she said in justifying zero COVID. She said, "I didn't worry that elimination might prove impossible. Even if New Zealand didn't get there, it would still save lives. The alternative is to set a lesser goal and still misfire." And those words now are just so resonant with me. I looked at the figures just now. In New Zealand, 5 million people in their population, only 26 died. And then I looked at our figures. 4,666 people have died here with COVID in the last year. And of course, like others, I want to extend sincere condolences and sympathies to the families of all those affected, all those who died and all those who've been ill. But just look at that. We have a similar population to New Zealand. We're an island nation, and our death toll has been 180 times that of New Zealand. So and as Jacinda Ardern said, yes, she was criticised that this wasn't practical and so on. But look at the benefit. Look at the immense cost, on the other hand, that we have had, the grief, the dreadful trauma, the huge pressure so many people have been under. I want to pay tribute to frontline workers, of course, as others have done. But, think of the trauma and grief we could have saved had we moved more swiftly earlier on, and think of the enormous impact as a result. But as we say, we are where we are now, I know. But I do think it's worth reflecting on. And, as we move through this, hopefully we will have time to look back and look at where we got things wrong, where we got things right. And it's worth just revisiting that point about Jacinda Ardern and her clear and coherent policy from the start. I do want to move to a more positive theme, though, and that is the issue of vaccination, and to finish on that, and to say that last Tuesday's prime time, Una Smith reporting, the joy of vaccination brought home to us, I think, that there is a way through this, and that I think, just to echo others, we do need to be pushing that good news story more than we are. Very positive to see that as of Friday, 11% of our population had their first dose, 4.4% are fully vaccinated. Minister, we need to hear more about that and to be promoting the need for everyone to avail of vaccines when they're available.